it doesn't have an operating system, so
Okay.
it's so hard.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to discussion panel regarding quite, I will be honest, quite nerve-tickling topic, how to deal with bad requirements in testing. Also very interesting one, I believe very familiar with each one of you. And I have a great team today together with me. Awesome speakers, like Geoffrey just finished his own presentation. And some of them, also like Yevheniia, also had the presentations in the morning, so you might have heard them, might have not, or some of them will still be working, talking in upcoming sessions. And before we jump into this great discussion, I really would love to do small introductions about each and every one of them. And let's start with with our lovely guest Yevheniia. And Yevheniia is, as she's saying about herself, is an experienced QA guild leader from Wix, who is passionate about agile testing, test automation, building quality on all levels, and bringing value to the products and teams. So, hello, Yevheniia.
Hi, nice to meet you guys.
Right. So, next one on the list is Phil Royston, a CEO of TestCon, who has found his true calling back in 2002 when he was unexpectedly thrown in the test manager seat, and since then, not only he has done his fair share of testing, but also worked very hard to change this testing world where we all live in and work in. Hi, Phil.
Hi there.
All right. So third one is Gjore, an agile evangelist and heuristic testing fighter from Servus, with pretty good testing experience behind his belt in basically all the types and domains, and who believes that test engineers are more than mere numbers to the clients. Hello, Gjore.
Hi, guys.
Hi, and as I just mentioned as the starters, we also have Geoffrey Wonder-Tuss, who just finished his own presentation. Basically, I believe you are a little bit out of breath, running from one to another. A team performance and quality coach from Ordina, where he helps teams to achieve maximum performance by helping to overcome obstacles by teaching, coaching, and mentoring them. So, hi, Geoffrey.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, and of course, last, me, your host, moderator of today's discussion, Janis. I'm from Latvia. I'm from Accenture Baltics. Currently, 17th year in testing industry for me, and I believe I will work 17 more. And for now, I'm working not as a testing lead in one of our projects, but also I'm very, very passionate about to work with people, to develop people, to watch them grow, guide them, and just to help them out in every aspect of the testing I can possibly can. Right. So I hope I haven't forgot anyone. And for the audience, as usual, feel free to ask the questions in our QA panel. We will go over the questions 10 minutes before we end this session, and keep an eye out for the polls, which I will be publishing in the chat during our discussion. Right. So quite easy and straight rules for you as well. So for this discussion, I believe we can definitely start. And I would like first to take you all, before I give word to you, I would like to take you all back it was in 2005 when I actually started to work in the testing field. And so for this whole time, I haven't been on one project where I haven't found this particular problem, which we will be talking about today. And this was the idea of mine last year that, finally I wanted to put this on the paper and just to get some clarifications out of that, and maybe also some ways how we can do this. So this most important problem that I have defined is, really how to deal with those bad requirements, how to deal with, also we can rephrase those as not just requirements, but test basis, like, so all the information that we can base our testing on, because every single project I have worked in, I have people crying for help, saying, "Janis, oh my God, I can't do this. I have no documentation to work with." Right. So other project is telling me, "All right, we are submitting bugs, but bugs have basically zero information in them, or there are bugs coming from different teams." Other people are blaming other functional designers for lack of design, lack of these. Diagrams and schemes about how the system could work. So basically, everywhere I go, I see these problems. Only might be different based on the project. So I would like to start this discussion asking you, my dear, speakers, have you also come across such scenarios that there are no flawless projects, but basically everywhere there is something missed? We can start with Yevheniia.
Okay, if I got the question correctly, then I think there is no even such a thing as good requirements. There can be like good enough requirements, which are like fine to work with, but usually it's so hard to meet a perfect documentation that we can base on. And moreover, I'm not even sure that we should aim to have that. But bad requirements is something that you can like. If I see it in most of the projects, and what I'm saying is that I'm not sure even it's that a bad thing or not, because usually such things they trigger a lot of discussions, and if they don't, they should, like from QA engineer especially, to trigger some learning unknown, understanding how to do it, and to end up with something that everybody can understand the same way, and then we can base on that. But we cannot really say that there is such a thing that a perfect requirement and aim for that. So that's my thought.
All right. Yeah, Phil is nodding. Phil, what about you?
Okay.
Sorry for that.
I'll keep my head still from now on. Yes, as I mentioned this morning, I became a test manager. I didn't do it. I wasn't a tester. I was some sort of general IT guy, and then I became a test manager. So I found something on Google which said, okay, you have requirements, functional specifications, and then we had we used HP ALM, which is now Micro Focus. I can't remember what it's called nowadays, and it had this linkage between test cases and requirements. Oh, this is really cool. Yeah, so I learned about requirements and how you should link test cases and requirements. And I used to go on projects, and I knew it was a stupid question. I always knew it was a stupid question, but I used to ask about the requirements. And I said, do you have requirements? And sometimes they would say yes. I said, oh, great. Have you kept them up to date? And they'd say, no. Yeah. I said, okay, forget those. Where's the functional specifications? And as we've already said here, usually there's some test basis. Yeah, and it's never the requirements. That's my experience. I've never ever worked with a project that had requirements. And we did a project for let's say a company that is under a lot of litigation pressure. If things go wrong, they get sued in the American courts, and they have very good standards set up. And I was thinking, okay, if this is the first time I'll ever see a project with great requirements and great documentation, and the standards said requirements, linkage, and everything. It really wasn't good. So It doesn't exist. It's a fictive beast, I believe.
Yeah, that same thoughts on my side. Anyone else, like Geoffrey, Gjore?
Yeah, I definitely did. What I hear is so familiar. Maybe one that is familiar as well is that I coach a lot of teams and they have to build like the same product again, right? So, but with newer technologies, and then they have to build it as is. And then you ask about requirements. Yeah, just like the same as the previous one. And that's like, for me, the worst thing, because it's an application that's already a couple of years old. Probably the users have a lot of functions that they want, but you want to build the same crap over again. That's just like, it's so familiar hearing all these stories. And if you talk about requirements, then they say, yeah, it has to be fast and it has to be the same. That's not requirements, right? It's...
that's expectations, basically.
It's really familiar, and so I see that a lot with teams, and then of course you try to get to good requirements, but I think the only way is getting there is being involved yourself, and that's also what we did during. So I participated in the Dutch Championships of testing in 2017 and 2018, and in 2018. There were really not a lot of requirements as well. So you really have to talk to your customer. So I think half of the time we spent only getting to know the customer, what they wanted and what they really wanted, right? So the system said something and they really wanted something different. I think that's what we as testers have to spend a lot of time on in either in automating things or getting to know the real requirements that talk about the value that our customers want.
Yeah, good approach. Gjore, what
about
you?
I would just say that there are no bad requirements. In order to have something bad, you need to have something good. So we do not have something good, and we cannot compare. So there is no such thing. I have never met also in this 15 years of experience requirements that are acceptable, let's say like that. People usually think that the biggest problem that I'm struggling to explain to people that when we have very huge fairy tales, I'm calling them fairy tales, is not a good requirement. because reading, I don't know, 250 pages for one single functionality is something that is not acceptable. So the requirement should be something for a single functionality, like, I don't know, update profile, let's say, the simplest functionality. We have some from a colleague, a business analyst, who wrote 50, 60 pages and nobody read them, and about updating 5 or 6 fields, about simple rules. We do not have, how to say, a starting point where to start a discussion. No one read them, the requirements, no one went over because no one had time, a lot of functionalities. So discussion, we throw everything and start a simple discussion. What we need to update, what are the fields, what is the rule about creating these fields. So when we know this, so a simple functionality, we took, I don't know, 50-20 minutes to clear everything, and that was even no requirements, even better than having, I don't know, pages and pages, 50, 60 pages of some fairy tales. So
good point. Gjore, I would just like to add that the bad requirement is not particularly one which doesn't have any information. Like if you open the task in Jira and there is 0, there is just a tumbleweed going somewhere in the middle. But bad requirement also can be, on the other hand, something that's so large, as you say, like for some small thing you have the documents and documents. Particularly this is happening in government agencies. Sorry if anyone from government is listening, but I have worked in past is government. They have piles of books and there's lots of things in those. All right, but what do you think? This maybe is more like an epiphany from my side, right? Do we really I heard like Yevheniia said that, also Phil and Geoffrey, that is there really a bad requirements, or is it just our perception of things? Because are we just used to those, that we are used to scenarios that we are given all this information, lovely created stories in Jira, and then we are basically like spoiled children waiting for something? What do you think about this?
Maybe I can share some thoughts. So I think that it's a historical thing, when we everybody said almost about this question: do we have requirements on the project? As as a default, that you come to project, you must ask about requirements. But it really requires some balance over here. Like if we cannot have 0, we cannot have too much. So it really depends on the domain, on the project you need to work with, and all such parts. And even if you look at the project and you see that there is like one-liner requirement, it's worth to start with understanding why it exists like this. And maybe the team is working on something better, like understanding the customer, which usually is like, I think when we have requirements fully documented and everything is clear, and even if they're not big and we can read them, then we try to take things as is. We are not challenging them, when like the biggest value of a QA engineer is to challenge. And this difference between just comparing with the requirements and really validating, understanding the product. So I totally agree that it's kind of our perception of saying that this is bad or good. And what we should really care about is not if we have requirements, if they are written good, if they have good pictures, but if we really understand the product, and if we have this connection with customer, because if we have, then we are good. We are on the safe side, we have trust, and we can take correct decisions. And even if they're not meeting the requirements, they will be still good. That's my thought.
Can I react to basically also the question like bad requirements, right? So I think a bad requirement is a requirement that's never discussed with the team, or not properly discussed with the team. Or actually maybe the only good requirement for me is a requirement that is discussed and maybe created by the team. I see a question if QA should write their own test or their own requirements. I think that would be weird. Why? Because someone also needs to develop the software, right? So should they be developing their own requirements as well, and based on what, right? So I think it should be a team activity to write proper and good requirements, and then you get your involvement as an entire team. I also talked about this during my talk. I think it's important to do this as a team. Refinements you do as a team, and you specify and you create your requirements there to make sure that everything is understandable. And from your own perspective, you can work out what that means for you. If you have to develop your code, you can think about what kind of classes am I going to create and how am I going to tackle this. But from because then they can also create the unit test. And from a tester's perspective, you might want to change a different direction from, okay, how I'm going to test this functionality and what are bad cases based on this. And so the only good requirement is the one that is specified with the team, and not only the team, maybe also the customer or consumer there as well, because they know what they really want. And then it's a valuable requirement.
Good point. I was not chatting with colleagues. I was just making notes because these are really, really nice and valuable points what you made. Phil, Gjore, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, definitely a lot of things to add on this. Definitely requirements, first of all, should start as discussion points. They should not be written with details or with no details. They should be ordered enough to be discussion points. So if you don't have a discussion point, if you don't know what to talk and how to define the things, and you will not have a requirement at all. So lack of requirement is something that we have. We do not have bad and good. The other thing is the other thing regarding this point of the how to say bad requirements is that sometimes team is not willing to not willing to know what is the product. So in order to have a requirement or define or discuss the things, you need to know the product. You need to not maybe the domain, but you need to start understanding the what we're building, what is the solution. At the end of the day, we are building softwares for people who are not IT. We're building software for end users. If we as a testers or developers do not want to learn what is the product about, I'm facing with this very often. So people are either thinking that either you need to be expert in that area. No, you don't need to be expert in that area. You just need to be interested for the product. Or developers think my idea is to build a form, and I'm going to build that form. So I don't care what the product is. In order to discuss and in order to come to a valid requirements and requirements that are in sync with the other systems, you need to understand at least that the basic point of the system, and you need to be willing to learn something about the product that you're building. So one product owner that I worked with, he was always saying, "This is your baby." So and I'm always giving to that. You need to accept that your baby is ugly. So how to improve these things? This is something that need a lot of discussion and good starting points.
Okay, sorry, I'm writing this down. That was a marvelous sentence. I will save this for later. Okay, Phil.
No, okay. Just final word, because it's a little bit irritating. Yeah, I don't know how old the Agile Manifesto is. Yeah, but some guys between 15 and 20 years ago went to a mountain hut somewhere and complained about exactly this problem. Yeah, we're building software that's a long way away from what people actually need, and the whole process, this whole Agile now DevOps process is to have the conversation. Yeah, have the conversation between the business and the developer and the tester who's emulating the end user. That's his job, is to look at it from the point of the end user, is to sit down, have a discussion, is what are we building here? Yeah? And they all understand it the same. And within hopefully one sprint, they can actually get it right. Yeah, without having to rework it. I mean, I'm from the old waterfall days. It was great. I mean, no doubt about it. It was the biggest circus. You run a project that lasted 5 years, for Christ's sake, and it was still wrong when you went live. And when you start reading about Agile, and I've not been directly involved in another project, you say, well, this is such a great idea. Just do it. What are we doing? Have the conversation. I think this is basically what the panel's already said. It's a discussion point. Sit down and talk about what we're actually building here, so everybody understands it the same. And if everybody understands it the same, then the chances of things going wrong are much, much less. Yeah, so you'll get it right first time, second time.
Yeah. Okay, this is really good point what you all said about what we can do, and this is what I want to continue with. So for a long term, right? So get the team to be interested in developing this project, to get the team to be interested in the value that the project brings. But in case, for example, you are new to the project, you come to it and you see, oh my God, you see all those crying people around you, all those angry functional designers, perhaps, or project managers. What can you do at that same exact spot? So how can you turn things around?
Okay, I can probably start with something.
Yeah, let's be creative at this one, because I also have a couple of points which I would like to share afterwards. But yeah, let's go crazy with this.
From what I saw previously, if we differentiate between two types of the project, first one which is kind of live already, and another one that is in development, users never seen it before. So for the ones where we have users, usually to get people to the requirements and to discussion, what helps is to get them closer to the users they have, to the feedback that they give, to some data that exists. Because usually from what I saw, especially requirements are usually not the most interesting topic for technical part, like for QA engineers, for developers, because we want to get something as is ready and such. But when you learn user histories, sorry if you hear some noise around me, but if you know some history behind it, some data, some user feedback, you really get interested in why it is like that. And if you have some data, it's a lot easier for you to dive deeper into this. But if you have a project that is not live yet, I had some interesting, I think sometimes it's about technical solutions to, you have to work on the requirements. Nobody likes, to sit in the document, on the Google, document, and to read requirement and to review it and such. Even if you do it on the meeting with pizza, nobody loves to do it. So in one case, what we did was we pushed all requirements as test scenarios to the GitHub repo. And what we did, we kind of trained our technical product managers to review it through, together with teams through the GitHub as any PR that you just push with code. And for that specific case, it was kind of a lot more fun than doing it through the Google Docs. So it worked better for us. So I think some solutions like this can also do the trick and make it interesting for people.
Mm-hmm. You mean like make it more like an entertainment for them? Not entertainment, but entertaining, right? So they don't find it very bland and gray. And so, okay.
Yeah.
Good point. All right. Anyone else?
Okay. Sorry. First thing, I mean, we again going back in history, the tester got some requirements or test basis, and he didn't understand it or realized it was no good. So he went out. This is what I said was a soft skills. You went out and start asking people, and you go and talk to the end users, and you go and talk to the business people, and you try and understand what you actually want, and then you write test cases based on those the inputs. And basically you threw all the best test cases away at that point, because the truth became the test cases, and everybody focused on the test cases. So you sent the test cases for approval to business, they approved them. So you created an alternative basis for the whole system. And the programmers were not involved in that conversation at all. They were kept out of the loop. And looking back, you were saying okay, why were we worried about, we don't know what this system should do? Where were the developers? Why weren't the developers banging on the doors and shouting, we don't understand what we're supposed to be coding. And then you look at, I'm from a development background, and you look at these days what developers are dealing with. They just do not have the mental capacity to deal with what you're actually trying to achieve. You bog down the technology. So I think we have to use some empathy. We have to use we have to use our soft skills to try and get the developers on board into trying to understand what they're trying to achieve. And from a tester's point of view, I always said the best thing for a tester is to send them and go and look at a branch or the call center or wherever where people are using the software. Just send them there and sit them next to people. And they go, wow, I never realized the software would be used like that. I didn't realize what they're actually going to do with the software. And they come back and make much better informed tests. So they were just two ideas.
Before Geoffrey jumps in, this was a method that we applied in one of my past workplaces, that if you want to get team production up, you just put everyone in the one office with the managers. And then you'll see how quickly they will behave. All right, Geoffrey, you want to word to you?
Yeah, so I wanted to jump back in time with my first assignment. I was acceptance tester for a project that has been running for 3 years. So we were at the end of the line, and my job was to talk to people and get the stuff accepted. And there's nothing as horrible as being an acceptance tester with 3 to 4 year old requirements. Because for everything, I went to the users and I said, well, we're going to accept the software. And they said, okay, let's start it up. And then they said, well, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And based on the requirements that were put down, it worked fine. But their way of working changed over the last 3 years, right? So I remember that was like a shitty job for me. And the developers, every time I went back to the developers, they said, well, it works as designed. Yeah, but it doesn't work in practice, right? So what are we building? are we building software that works as we designed it, or are we building software that really works, right? So that became I asked that question, I think maybe after the first month. I was really annoyed, and I asked that question in a management meeting. I said, are we building software according to plan, or are we building software that really helps people? And the project manager said, well, we need to stick to the plan because we don't have money. And then, of course, the accepting party said, no, we need to keep to we need to make software that works, right? So end goal is always to create software that works. But sometimes that's a hard thing to tackle. So basically what we looked at is what do you really need, right? What do you really need? And what can we do to fix that? And what are really wishes that we can add in the next months or years? Mm-hmm. And basically that became like the fundamental to change some of the things according to, well, based on the plan, but to make it workable. But yeah, they still had to accept software that wasn't all like what they wanted. I see a comment coming in and stop with the word requirement. I really agree with that, just to respond to it. I see someone else do it. I prefer the word specifications. And I really think requirement has such a load. There's like, I saw a training about requirements as well, like from EREP, how to create great requirements. And sometimes you have to build things to get feedback and see if it works or not, right? So I think it's also for us as testers to see if we want to deliver good software, valuable software, but we can't always protect the future. So we do need to work together, I think, and see what kind of things that work and what doesn't. So some of my colleagues are calling themselves feedback consultant. They are more of the testers that work with the customer to see if things work. They are more on the value side, and yeah. I think that is also a shift that we see more and more, especially if you don't like the technical stuff, right? Because I think validating things quickly, it's good to, to see if the software at least has the basic quality, and for that you might needs clear specifications.
Okay, thank you. Gjore, do you have something?
Yeah. I won't take a lot maybe on this, but beside the feedback that Geoffrey mentioned, I would say one more thing is very important when some of the requirements or specifications are unclear. Maybe creating workarounds is the best solution in such cases, because I've worked on such project and nothing was clear what needed to be done, because all the stakeholders, it was software for internal organization, so all the stakeholders were not sure how something should work because they were using some Excels, very old Excels, 20, 30 years old, spreadsheet formats that they don't know how it will work. They use tables at the beginning, they populating on hand, so they didn't know how it will work. They didn't know, so we make we made these workarounds. So everything turned out to be perfect at the end. They love the product.
Mm-hmm. So then we have talked through about the cases when we have come across such things, right? So when we join the project, existing one, what do you think, how we can prevent this from happening at the very start? So we imagine we just start the project, everyone, like all five of us are around the table, and our task is to make sure this never ever happens. So what we should do? What do you think?
Can I take that one?
Yeah, please.
I think at first we should take more of an agile approach. Yeah, I really like Scrum, but it allows us to take small steps to get feedback and steer to the right point. And I see also the comment about hypothesis or an experiment or an idea. I think that is always right. If you're not sure, even a customer doesn't know what he wants until he sees it, right? So he can write all his requirements down, and then in the first iteration, he can say, "Well, I basically don't need that anymore." And that's the same with the as-is software. I currently work with a team that have their assignment is really simple: build system A in a new technology in a new system, etc. So they build it, and then somewhere halfway, person says, well, I really never use that feature. So they did an investigation. They just finished building a feature that no one ever uses. And funny thing is that some manager in business perspective said, this is high urgent, this we need right now, right? Instead of the users telling them, well, they told it somewhere halfway, so at least they saved some time, but they also spent some time in building software that was never going to be used. And I think there's a talk about from Gjore Zaharchev as well about how much software is being built and never is being used, right? I think if you look up the numbers, you see different reports. I think about 60% of the software we build is never used, and I think you want to prevent that. And if you start a project, to come back to your original question, you want to take small steps. You want to validate all the time. You want to see if you're building the right stuff and taking the right decisions. So you don't want to put too much time in putting requirements on paper in front of your starting point. Just see what comes along and spend some time during each sprint to see what the next step is.
I would only add, I 100% want to agree about doing this agile approach, because we're sometimes a bit afraid, about moving before we have the 100% clear things we need to do. But stops us from experimenting and checking the stuff, relying on data and reacting fast. But I think it's not just the software we need to build it, changeable and adaptive to change. We also need to build same requirements, maybe to use some graphical approach, some charts, some maps, mind maps, some tools that helps us to easily change and update requirements, because this usually is the most comprehensive thing when you spend half of the sprint updating your requirements and half of the sprint on developing them. So maybe this is also something to think about.
Good. Yeah. Field?
Okay, I agree, yes, but I think creativity requires experimentation, and creativity requires accepting that you can fail. So the fact that 60% of software is not used may be the price we have to pay to have 40% of the rest, which is absolutely fantastic software. Maybe, just my only point to add to that. I think we shouldn't be frightened that we've created something that's wrong. But we have to accept that it's wrong, and we have to fix, make it better, or throw it away, maybe.
With experimentation comes measuring, right, and seeing the effect. And I think that's true. I think only we've worked multiple times maybe on making products work and never getting it to work. I always like to mention Clippy. I don't know if people remember that in Office.
Yeah, I do.
Note that was in the side. Everybody clicked it away. It was really annoying. And Microsoft spent quite a lot of money and time on it to invest to work on it. And no one ever told me that they liked it. So if someone liked it, please speak up, because then I finally have someone that liked it. But it's now not in there anymore. But it's a good example.
Really, the data is something you can when you already have users, of course. When you don't, it's sometimes hard. You need to do some interviews or something like this to understand, but still, data is something cool to rely on. And I love the book called Lean Startup, which is really not just about building startups, but about everything, about experimenting on anything, and how to check some hypothesis. In the chat, we are calling it hypothesis now, how to check it without spending millions on that, which is something important to check, and especially about the requirements, because requirements is something that define what the whole team will be thinking about, and then making it valuable. And then we sometimes get sad when it gets not used, and A/B test fails and the feature never goes to production. So I think that such things can be also super cool for people to read, to think about how to experiment.
Yeah. Good. Right, so we are getting close to our QA session, so I have one last question to you. Just give me a quick answer. What do you think? Because good point is about experimentation and everything that we start from this at the very beginning. We don't know how that one will end up, right? So the question goes, are those, we can call them bad requirements, test basis, whatever, what lies beneath those two words, but are those inevitable? What do you think?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question at the end.
So are those are the case that eventually we will introduce those bad requirements? Is this inevitable, meaning that we cannot escape from that? We just can define a really good start, and we can define the mitigation actions on the way. What do you think about this? Just short answer, because we need to start the QA.
Yeah, I think that we can avoid these situations very often in most of the cases. First of all, we need excellent team and a good communication within the team. This is the case number one. That's why in Macedonia we're always saying, when you have a problem with some developer, go to Kafana and solve the problem. Kafana is some Balkan restaurant where raki is served, so it's very difficult field for conversation. So I think that this is one of the solutions of the problem.
Good, thank you. Right, I believe let's jump to the Q&A, because we have, I see 5 questions, so I will just read from the top. First one from Marta goes, how would you map requirements in acceptance criteria written on a user story to test cases to be able to ensure traceability? Should QA write again their own requirement list? Right. So question from Marta's side. What do you think?
On this one,
yes,
we had a case where we tried to improve the requirements by writing test cases, and we ended up with just teaching product managers how to do better requirements. So we ended up with one doc. But what can work here is a thing that calls specification by example, which is something in between of test cases and requirements. But I think it's better, like you can start with tracing it with some tools, but eventually I would end up with something that is only one document and probably in examples.
Okay, good point. Anyone else would like to add something to Mark's
I would agree fully. You've got a user story. You should then develop on that acceptance criteria, which for me sounds like a test case, and from that you can write test scripts. Yeah, it's a terminology thing. Yeah, so but basically acceptance criteria should say, if I do this, this is what I expect. That's your acceptance criteria, and definition of done should be based on the acceptance criteria, and it should be one document. And I saw just recently practical example of using Gherkin on user stories, and I was blown away, and I was really skeptical before.
Nice tool, right? Okay. Next one.
Can I
yes,
add
please,
one
Geoffrey.
thing?
Yeah,
really
sorry.
short. So for me, refining together by using, for example, specification by example or example mapping, as was already mentioned, that is the really most powerful thing I think you can do in this case, because then you already have your mapping, and it makes really sense, and then you end up with Gherkin, right? So to put the story together, start with refining together, use specification by example or example mapping or feature mapping. There's multiple ways. Then work yourself towards Gherkin, and you have that all covered. So you have your living documentation in the end. Right, so that is the way you want to move forward, and that's also how you collaborate, because you build your test and your development. You do that at the same time.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Geoffrey, for that. Okay, next question from Anya: is it worth to add requirements when everything is already tested?
There is one long answer and one short answer.
Let's make it middle.
Yeah, the short answer is no, and the long answer is no. That's my answer.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. Okay.
Are you ever done testing, right?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
next
so.
one. Yes, please finish. All right. So next one, Yevheniia is asking, how do you think in case the requirements are very common and there is no exact people who can describe it fully, should particularly test engineers create own version describing this closer realization, or so teams should have separate people who can describe these requirements in more detail?
Can I give a short answer to that?
Yes, the same.
The team should work on their own requirements, right? So it's a little bit the same as before. Use specification by example mapping. You can also invite your customer or your clients or the people that you use the software for. You need to facilitate that correctly. And there you will work out the basis of your requirements collaboratively, and then you can detail them out. And that should be to the team, if you ask me.
Just one only thing, maybe also think about automating your requirements. Like usually tests are the best requirements, like unit tests, end-to-end tests, because this is something you cannot just avoid changing when something changes. So if it's only for the team, then maybe tests can become a good requirement. And here maybe also Gherkin can be something that helps, to make it understandable for other people. But I believe that test automation is one of the best requirements you can go with, because they're always up to date.
Okay, Anything else to add from anyone? No. All right. I really enjoyed the next one from Peter. So doesn't weird behavior and culture start with the word requirement? What if we think more in hypothesis and experiments? In the direction of we think when we build this feature, we will increase customer happiness, acquisition, job time, lead time, whatever. What other terms have you seen?
Yeah, maybe I can start on this. Why not calling hypothesis or experiments? Because most of the softwares we built, especially in my company that we built, are softwares that already exist. Maybe they exist. Somebody collects information on paper. Somebody collects information in Excel. Somebody is doing something with other tools. These are actually some solutions that they work. So that's why maybe more the requirement is not appropriate word, but also the hypothesis or experiment is not, because we are not working for startups. This is the problem in most of the cases. When working for startups, yes, everything is an experiment, and maybe that is the most appropriate word, because we experiment, we do the market research, we do all of these things. So this is the part one. In the direction of we think we build this feature will increase the customer happiness. Increasing the customer happiness depends of depends from many factors actually. So depends from a customer to customer and depends from a station to station. So maybe everything, I would end up with this, that everything depends from a situation to situation. Other terms that I have seen with the requirements, maybe about requirements or specification, something similar are, I don't know, maybe I didn't came prepared for this. Maybe I'll come up with something by the end. Someone else can.
Maybe in the short, it depends, Peter. In some places you can, in some places you can't. You can also call them specifications. But it depends.
I think it depends on the organization. I think you can expect in some organizations a high level of maturity that there are people who can really define very specifically what their requirement is, because they've had lots of experience in it. And you go to other places where you are experimenting or prototyping or even prototyping. And the other word I've used is expectation. Yeah, what are your expectations?
But I believe, just to comment from us, it also depends on them. Not only culture, but also on language, what you're in which you're speaking. Because in Latvia, if you are communicating in my country in Latvian, we don't have this, such word requirements, which might sound quite strong word if you translate it directly. So we have something similar, and maybe this. That's why I said I love this question from Peter. That it's really, that depends on how this, what this word implies when you say actually the same, like if you all remember the movie Matrix, right, when they were talking about the love in the third part, right? Do you don't feel?
I don't remember, no.
No, okay, you still have time, because there is fourth movie coming out in this December. You have time to see all three.
It's another men driving cars fast film or something. Maybe.
Okay. Anyway, I see next question from Yevheniia is the same as previous. If I'm not wrong, please, Yevheniia, correct me. And there is one more, then we have still time. We're often complaining on inputs that are not good enough, increasing efficiency and trying to keep afloat. But as soon as we stop drowning, the pace increases, so we are only keeping afloat, and then we are all complaining and on how the low quality impacts everything, and so it is it and so on. Is it possible to just stop shipping, as Uncle Bob would say, really find a way to enforce high quality somehow, not in some particular company, but in the QA profession as a whole?
Short answer to this question is definition of done. Use a definition of done. And
want to say the same.
But sometimes always to think about, there is not always must be highest possible quality. We should be really in balance. Sometimes we are always in balance between velocity and quality. And sometimes if you are a startup, like we talked before, velocity is a higher priority, because you need to test your idea, you need to experiment. And if you're having millions of users and you just cannot make them suffer, so you need to keep the heights. Always about risks. It's always about finding the correct balance.
Okay. Yeah. Yevheniia, thank you for that. we have 20 seconds left in this call. There are lovely epiphanies in the chat, so if you still have a chance, go over them. I really love a couple of those comments. Unfortunately, we will not address those right now, maybe in the chat, as we will still have our upcoming sessions. But in the last seconds, what we have, I would like to thank all the speakers for this great talk. I have lots of notes made, and good luck, and I hope to see you soon.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.